Welcome to Applied Clinical Trials podcast series, Quality Systems for Clinical Research. Will you be ready? Brought to you by Compliance Insight. Compliance Insight specializes in regulatory and quality assurance consulting and training for pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, medical device, chemical, and biotechnology companies in North America, Europe, and Asia. To find out more, please visit them on the web at compliance-insight.com. And now, here's your host for this podcast, Reed Paul.
Hello, this is Reed Paul, Multimedia Editor of Applied Clinical Trials magazine, and I'm here today with Julie Gerlach, Compliance Specialist and Clinical Operations Director from Compliance Insight. Today, we're addressing a quality systems approach for clinical research. Thank you for joining me, Julie. To get us started, why the current focus on quality systems in clinical research?
For many years, the quality in the research community was addressed by quality alliances, quality assurance processes to correct problems that would arise in a clinical trial. Little was done, though, to look at the planning in a priori focus on quality management of the clinical trial. Recent economic stresses have led to many research programs cuts that impact both public health and safety. FDA has done more vigilant review of clinical trial data that's been submitted as part of the NDA BLA processes, and they have noted that they're unable to really correct the problems that they're reviewing after the clinical trial has occurred. So there has been much planning and discussion and talks between the FDA and major universities like Duke who have looked at quality systems in reviewing clinical trials. FDA is moving towards a real-time inspection of clinical trials, not waiting for the clinical trial data to be submitted in an NDA or BLA application, but actually being there doing inspections real-time. And they have made great progress in supporting having guidances that reflect their current thinking on this process. As clinical trials become more complex, the clinical research community must see and use their resources wisely. Implementing a quality system allows a proactive real-time assessment of the clinical trial.
Haven't quality systems been used in other industries?
Yes, very definitely. Focus on quality systems, it isn't new. It's based on practices and activities that are used in good manufacturing processes, quality by design concepts. However, clinical trials can be complex, and GMP standards, or the good manufacturing process standards, and ISO 9000 standards aren't implemented seamlessly into the clinical research arena.
What are the inherent complexities of clinical trial research?
The current conduct of clinical trials has evolved over the years and often involves sponsors outsourcing responsibilities to contract research organizations or CROs. Monitoring methods have become burdensome and do not take on a risk-based approach. This is something that the FDA addressed in a draft guidance in 2009. Centralized IRBs have oversight or jurisdiction of clinical trials. Now, it's not just the local university IRB, but actually there's been outsourcing of review of clinical trials to the independent institutional review boards. Foreign clinical sites are now being selected for the conduct of clinical trials. Sometimes the population that the treatment is going to be actually implemented in, you're finding the populations in the overseas, not necessarily here in the United States. You may have cheaper, less cost involved in clinical trials that are conducted overseas. As resources for clinical trials have shifted overseas, experience has decreased for young investigators and clinicians and research staff in the U.S. So there are many complexities of clinical trials that need to be looked at.
What is quality in a clinical trial?
According to Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, this is the Duke University's Clinical Trial Initiative group. Quality is the ability to effectively and efficiently answer the intended question about benefits and risks of a medical product, therapeutic or diagnostic, or a procedure while assuring protection of human participants. Very important.
And what are the goals and the aims of the clinical research quality system?
Goals of the clinical research quality system are as follows. You want to identify the data and processes that underpin data integrity and clinical trial quality, such as those on which there would be a focus in trial oversight efforts. A second goal would be to ensure that the procedures and roles, responsibilities for generating, collecting, and reporting are prospectively defined and communicated. And the third point is that a goal of the clinical research quality system should establish mechanisms to proactively, and again the word proactive is important, to identify compliance signals. And the last goal of a clinical research quality system would be to ensure that effective corrective preventative actions are designed and implemented.
What are the general requirements of a clinical quality system?
Okay. General requirements of a clinical quality system are to implement the quality before the start of the clinical trial. This is even before the protocol is designed, before there's site selection, etc. You're looking at a kind of a collaboration amongst your stakeholders in looking at the protocol design. General requirements of a clinical quality system should involve personnel roles and responsibilities that are understood by all members of the study team and staff. That it has to occur prior to the clinical trial start. Principal investigators should know their responsibilities and be involved and be interactive. They can't not show up for meetings. They need to be actively involved and concerned about what their roles are. Training records are another important piece. Has there been training of staff, sub-investigators that's appropriate? Do you train to the protocols, SOPs, their procedures? Have you looked at your own institution's SOPs and the site's SOPs as well? So you need to be aware of what human participation protection is in place. You need to be aware of handling of biological specimens. You should have policies, procedures that deal with confidentiality of data, data storage, record retention, etc. These are just to name a few. And certainly a site should have site-specific SOPs and protocol-specific SOPs that are reviewed periodically to ensure tasks are consistently executed. Another requirement is there should be a quality assurance and auditing in place. Quality assurance program allows for regular auditing and independent review of the site, their study materials, and if a site doesn't have a QA program, one should be established immediately. It's not something that should be you're halfway through the clinical trial and you say, oh, hey, that would be a good idea to do it now. Do it beforehand. A quality system depends on quality assurance and auditing, and it can be, some of that is internal. Document management, record retention, and reporting are extremely important. There have been applications the FDA has received, and the recording of results has been erroneous or not well defined, and FDA has refused to file those NDAs and sent those back. Very costly. Another issue, a general requirement of a clinical quality system, there should be a corrective and preventive action plan, and it includes anticipating your potential problems, intervene before your problems become endemic.
A quality system program involves methods for quality improvement. What types of errors must be addressed, and how are they addressed?
Okay. They're generally, the quality system has to address 4 types of errors as part of the quality improvement plan, and they're based on design errors. Design errors can adversely affect patient safety and compromise interpretation of study results. Some examples of design errors include inadequate sample size, flawed randomization schemes, or potential for unblinding that can introduce serious bias. And what we look at in protocol design or design errors and preventing them is to have peer review and oversight by an independent trial committee, data monitoring committee, to assess the protocol's impact on data that's being submitted and reviewed. A second error that we see is procedural errors, and those are really systematic failures to follow the study protocol or standard operating procedure. Examples might be failure to recognize that a participant is ineligible for the study because of a previous adverse event to one of the drugs under study. So if you've now enrolled this really ineligible participant into the program and you've randomized them to one of the drugs under study, that has some very potential harmful effects and can be extremely horrific. So avoidance through initial training and subsequent visits is key. So most people feel that procedural errors can be reviewed or should be reviewed in real time to be effective. Recording errors, both random and fraudulent, I won't go into those, but data recording errors are all too common, and there's bias when staff have knowledge of the treatment allocation. So keeping the blinding, keeping drugs, controls, placebos appropriately masked is very important. The last error that one sees are analytical errors, and those are usually introduced during analysis and interpretation of results. A good quality system needs to address each of these. And through careful planning and design of the protocol and procedures, have a potential risks been identified and rated as to their adverse effect on the safety of the trial. So maybe there are potential risks that don't have a significant result. So maybe you're off on age. Does that matter as much as you didn't detect the participant who had an adverse event to the drug and they're randomized to that drug? So you need to think about the potential issues and potential risks that are involved with each of those errors. Once you've established a system, you need to be able to work efficiently while improving that process. And this is the last, probably the biggest key to this is there are several solutions in managing and working with quality improvement in the quality system. Several solutions to these problems involve using a Deming cycle, that plan, do, check, act cycle. These are fairly new to the clinical research community. Six Sigma, Lean and Total Quality Management programs are all fairly have not often been used. I think we're going to see more of this as we come along during the next year or two.
Can you describe steps to support implementation of a clinical quality system?
Yes, definitely. I think you definitely need to have the stakeholders involved. There needs to be organization, institutional support. You can't go anywhere unless you have their buy-in. If you're at an institution, your IO, that's your institutional official, your compliance officer, your IRB need to be in and agree with what you have. If you don't have a quality assurance program or post-approval monitoring program, you really need to have those in place and have a supportive organization that wants to act on this. You want to hire experienced staff. I can't say this enough. And if you don't have that experienced staff to pull from or select from, make sure that there is training that they can receive. Don't overburden inexperienced staff on the first day and say, hey, you're in charge of these 20 research projects. That just shouldn't be done. Create systems that limit the opportunity for errors. Communicate effectively. Do once a week staff meetings, project meetings, where everyone can list their observations, make note of what's been going on. That actually can open the means for more effective communication. Develop data and safety monitoring plans. Have expertise in development and review of those plans. That might take your organization or institutional support to have that expertise in place, but definitely worthwhile. Plan unblinding procedures carefully. Do you have a disaster plan in place in your site? And do you have data management practices in place? Transfer data from one source to another has been extremely important, and there have been delays with applications to FDA and even with sponsors based on poor transfer of data. Encourage and be open to internal audits. And again, I just mentioned post-approval monitoring being effective here. They can do a real-time internal audit or inspection of a clinical investigator in the site and can lend some very good examples and lend some expertise as to how problems might be corrected, how they can be implemented, or how they can actually do a continuous improvement for the issues that arise.
That was an interesting overview on a quality systems approach for clinical research. Thank you for joining me, Julie.
Well, thank you.
You've been listening to Applied Clinical Trials podcast series, Quality Systems for Clinical Research. Will you be ready? Brought to you by Compliance Insight. Compliance Insight specializes in regulatory and quality assurance consulting and training for pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, medical device, chemical, and biotechnology companies in North America, Europe, and Asia. To find out more, please visit them on the web at compliance-insight.com.